Have you ever seen a woman deemed too old survive an unforgiving blizzard, only to be rescued by those her own community branded as strangers? That's exactly what happened to Harriet Lockwood, thrust from her nephew's homestead into a cruel Dakota winter. Certain she would die. Instead, a Lakota warrior named Gray Arrow found her, half frozen, sparking a series of events no one could have predicted. Harriet, once discarded, discovered value and respect among a people her society called savages. This gripping story follows Harriet's remarkable second chance at life and love, set against the vast plains where survival demands both heart and resilience. Curious how a cast-out aunt became a treasured elder in the tribe, and even found a partner when hope seemed lost? Stay tuned for every twist and triumph. While you're here, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any incredible tales like this one. The Dakota Territory, 1867, a landscape as harsh and unyielding as it was grand. Snowdrifts soared along rickety fences, and the winter wind keen like a hungry ghost. Within a weather-beaten cabin sat Harriet Lockwood, a woman of 48 winters, whose hair showed streaks of silver and whose face bore the lines of long toil and quiet endurance. In the corner, an aged pendulum clock ticked with ominous solemnity, but it could not blot out the storm raking the flimsy wooden walls. Each gust rattled the window panes, as if the wilderness itself demanded entry. Harriet had lost her older brother, Henry Lockwood, a mere 3 months past. With Henry's death, leadership of the homestead passed into the hands of his only son, Davis Lockwood, a man of 35 who wore his father's boots and height, but none of his compassion. Davis now stood at the rough-hewn table, speaking with cold finality. Beside him hovered his wife, Eleanor, nervously twisting the lace of her apron. Harriet warmed herself as best she could by the scant flames in the hearth, each flicker throwing sharp shadows across faces once kind, but now closed to her fate. "She can't stay here another winter," Davis insisted, leveling a gaze on Harriet that held none of the familial kindness she'd once known. "She's too old to be of any real help. Another mouth to feed. We have our own children to think of. The land is barely yielding enough for us, much less for an aunt who can't pull her weight." Harriet's heart sank at his words, though she kept her back rigid against the indignity. She'd sensed this day would come. Her brother Henry's promise that she would always have a place here died the same afternoon he did. Yet she had hoped Davis might show mercy, or at least decency, especially given the many years she had spent nursing his children, mending his clothes, and plowing the fields alongside his late father whenever hands were short. But as she glanced at Eleanor's averted eyes, Harriet realized there would be no one to speak in her defense. "You mean to turn me out?" Harriet asked quietly, refusing to plead. Pride was her final armor. She cast a longing look about the room, her wedding gift rocking chair, the patchwork quilt on the bed that she'd sewn by hand over countless winter evenings, the small shelf of books her mother had left behind. So many memories. Davis squared his shoulders. "I've packed your things. There's a bundle with some dried biscuits and a few tools. You can try walking to the stage route that runs toward Fort Mayfield. 10 miles south of here, the Williams family left a barn behind when they moved east. You can shelter there tonight. The stage passes at dawn." Harriet cast a glance at the window. The storm howled, piling snow against the glass. 10 miles in a blizzard could kill any person, let alone one my age, she said, her voice calm but threaded with terror. A memory of the open prairie, an endless sea of white, loomed in her mind. A single traveler had no real chance against such odds. "That's not my affair," Davis said flatly, arms folding as though to bar any further discussion. "What we can't do is keep you here through another lean season. Father might have indulged you, but he's gone. My decision stands." Little Anna, Davis's youngest child, rushed forward and clung to Harriet's skirt, tears shimmering in her big eyes. "Don't make Aunt Harriet leave. She's the one who makes my cough better when it gets bad." But Davis pulled the child away, muttering that Eleanor could learn Harriet's remedies. Harriet fought back a wave of bitterness. So it was settled, as simply as that. Harriet Lockwood, who had served and supported the homestead for nearly 15 years, was labeled a burden and cast out like unwanted husks after the harvest. Within the hour, she found herself on the threshold, a small pack over her shoulder, the wind slicing through her threadbare coat. The door shut behind her with a finality that stole the air from her lungs. She stood on the porch for a heartbeat longer, forcing herself not to glance back, then trudged into the teeth of the storm. The first mile felt almost easy, driven by Harriet's simmering anger that Davis could be so heartless. But the prairie wind intensified, hammering her slight form with relentless force. Snow clung to her boots, each step more laborious than the last. She had no illusions about her odds. A single misstep in these conditions could mean a twisted ankle, or worse. 10 miles might as well have been 100. Night gathered quickly. The pale winter sun offered no warmth and vanished behind a mounting wall of gray, leaving Harriet in a world tinted only by the bleak hues of impending dusk. Somewhere out there lay the Williams barn, if she even walked in the correct direction. The simplest landmarks, fence posts, low hills, even the course of the creek, were obliterated by drifts of snow that rose waist-high. Each step tore at her stamina, the biting cold seeping into her joints until they ached with every movement. The thought of stopping, even to rest a few minutes, terrified her. She recalled frontier stories where a single hour's sleep in a winter storm was a death sentence. So Harriet pushed on, clutching her walking stick and the meager shawl around her face to shield herself from the cutting wind. She pressed her lips together, a futile attempt to stop them from trembling. The sky darkened to a bruised purple, and flurries thickened. She had no choice but to find shelter, any shelter at all. Then she noticed a line of cottonwoods on what she guessed was the bank of Whispering Creek, though the swirling snow made it hard to be sure. Cottonwoods often meant a lower spot, possibly an overhang or uprooted trunk that could serve as a windbreak. Harriet headed that way, stumbling down an incline that turned out to be steeper than expected. She lost her footing and slid several yards, colliding with the trunk of a fallen tree that jarred her from scalp to heel. Pain jolted through her hip, and spots danced before her eyes. Her breath hitched, plumes of white vapor escaping her cracked lips. The storm's ferocity roared overhead, gusts carrying flakes that stung like tiny needles. Crawling on hands and knees, she found what she'd hoped for, a slight depression under the tree's tangle of roots. It was scarcely large enough for one person, but would at least block the direct assault of the wind. Harriet crawled inside, fingers numb as she unlatched her pack. She had a few matches, a small tinderbox, and a handful of kindling. She coaxed a trembling flame to life, feeding it with the driest twigs she could salvage from beneath the overhang. The flicker of firelight, weak as it was, felt like a miracle. But Harriet knew it would not last the night. She had no real fuel, and in a few hours darkness would swallow the skies entirely. Still, she refused to yield to despair. Perhaps the morning would bring a lull in the storm, granting her a chance to crawl further toward the barn or the stage route. She forced herself to melt a bit of snow for water, sipping the frigid liquid as her body fought to keep warm. Yet as the wind shifted, it whirled snow into her tiny haven. Each time she tried to shield the flame with her body, the cold slithered deeper into her bones. Minutes passed like hours, and Harriet's drowsiness grew alarmingly. She slapped her cheeks, knowing that sleep, here and now, spelled doom. Her eyelids betrayed her anyway, sagging with exhaustion. Just as her mind drifted to the edge of oblivion, an unlikely sound pierced the shriek of the wind. Hoofbeats. At first, she thought her exhausted brain invented it, a final hallucination of rescue. But the thud-thud-thud sharpened, too rhythmic to dismiss. Harriet roused enough strength to crane her head from the hollow. Through the blowing flurries, she glimpsed silhouettes. Riders, at least 3 or 4, dressed in furs with braided hair streaming from beneath heavy hoods. In the wavering glow of her dying fire, she saw their faces. These were no settlers from a neighboring homestead. The high cheekbones and dark eyes hinted at men from the Dakota tribes. For an instant, Harriet felt stark terror. She had grown up hearing stories of Indian raids, of war parties striking at isolated settlers. But fear yielded to a different thought. These might be her only chance. If they passed by without seeing her, that flame of hope would gut her, leaving her to freeze. "Help!" she croaked, voice hoarse and brittle. Summoning the last of her will, she forced out a louder cry. "Here! Please, help!" One rider broke from the group, dismounting with smooth urgency. He advanced, scanning the shadows until his gaze locked on her huddled figure. The warrior lifted a hand, speaking soft words in a language Harriet only partially recognized. She responded with the little Dakotan she knew. "Cold, alone, family cast me out." His eyes narrowed, taking in her condition. Blue lips, trembling limbs, the meager fire. He exchanged swift words with the others. Harriet's vision blurred, the swirl of the blizzard blending with the paltry flames. Then strong arms lifted her, wrapping her in a warm, fur-lined blanket. The enveloping heat was blissful, yet almost painful against her numb skin. As she drifted into near unconsciousness, Harriet felt the man hoist her onto his horse, cradling her as if she weighed nothing. The last thought that flickered through her mind was a mixture of relief and disbelief. Strangers, Dakota men, the ones her nephew's neighbors called savages, were saving her life, where her own kin had turned her away. Then the storm-racked darkness claimed her, and she lost all sense of time or place. Harriet awoke uncertain how many days had passed. She was nestled in a domed shelter of hide and poles that stretched above her like a low, peaked roof of a Lakota teepee. A modest fire burned at the center, feeding warmth into the space. The first inhalation of awareness revealed the rich smell of sage and animal hides, coupled with something medicinal. Her body ached fiercely, and as she tried to shift, she realized layers of blankets pinned her in place. She coughed, drawing the attention of a tall, silver-haired woman stooped over a small clay pot. The woman turned, revealing features carved by years of laughter and sorrow. Her hair, though streaked with gray, was braided with bits of shell and bead, suggestive of respected status. With a nod, she dipped a ladle into the pot and brought it to Harriet's cracked lips. Harriet drank a surprisingly savory concoction that carried both bitterness and a hint of mint, the warmth sliding down her throat. She attempted to speak, but the woman held up a hand, soft yet commanding. "Drink first," the woman said in accented English. "Heels inside." Harriet obeyed, discovering she lacked the strength for anything else. After several sips, she managed a hoarse whisper. "Where am I?" "Winter camp of Hawk Valley, Lakota," replied the woman, who then offered a faint, reassuring smile. "You near death. My son found you. Brought you here." Harriet closed her eyes, memory returning in shards. The blizzard, her bundle, the hopeless trek, and then the silhouette of riders appearing out of the swirling snow. She had truly believed she would never see another morning. Yet here she was, alive, in the care of people white settlers typically maligned. She felt a flood of conflicting emotions, relief, gratitude, and an undercurrent of apprehension. Her own nephew had discarded her for being too old. Now, these strangers had saved her life, though she knew little of their customs or intentions. "What is your name?" Harriet managed, each word scraping her throat. The older woman wiped Harriet's brow with a damp cloth. "I am Grandmother Water Lily," she said, seating herself gracefully beside the blankets. "You call me Water Lily if easier. My son is Gray Arrow. Warrior, council voice." Harriet's mind conjured an image of the man who had lifted her from the snow, a tall figure with braided hair beneath a fur hood, his face calm yet urgent. "I owe him my life," Harriet murmured, blinking back an unexpected tear. Water Lily nodded. "Yes, but he sees your spirit, knows you are cast out by your kin. This we do not understand." At Harriet's questioning look, Water Lily elaborated, "In our tribe, elders are honored. Old ones hold wisdom for children, for all. Why white family throw away an elder? Bad medicine." She spoke the words without anger, yet Harriet heard the perplexity shading them. I'm not sure," Harriet said wearily. How could she explain the prejudices of a culture that cherished youth above experience, that measured worth by how many bushels one could harvest or how many rooms one could keep tidy? The flaps at the teepee's entrance rustled, admitting a gust of cold air and a figure wrapped in furs. Harriet tensed, but at the sight of Gray Arrow's face, recognizable from that night in the storm, her anxiety lifted. He carried himself with a quiet confidence. When his gaze fell on her, Harriet perceived a profound calm beneath his stern exterior. "You awake," Gray Arrow said simply. His English was careful but clear. He removed a fur-lined hood, allowing lamplight to reveal the lines of his cheeks and a few small scars. "You strong. Many would not survive." Harriet mustered a tired smile. "Thank you for finding me," she said, fighting an urge to cry outright. "I would have perished." Gray Arrow inclined his head, as though such an outcome had been an unthinkable waste. Why alone in blizzard? That question required an answer Harriet scarcely knew how to deliver. Yet she felt honesty was her best path. She tried to give an abbreviated account. her brother's death, her nephew's betrayal, that she was deemed no longer worth feeding. As she spoke, Gray Arrow's expression hardened, and Water Lily muttered something in the Lakota tongue that sounded like condemnation. Harriet felt both shame and relief at laying out the painful truth. All people get old, Gray Arrow said at last, his voice edged with quiet rebuke, not toward Harriet, but toward the society that had cast her aside. This nephew has no respect. Bad heart. Harriet sank back into the blankets. I cannot blame your confusion, she replied, voice trembling. I don't understand it myself. Water Lily pressed another cup to Harriet's lips. No more talk now, heal first. And so Harriet closed her eyes, letting exhaustion carry her into a dreamlike haze. For the next stretch of days, she could not say how many, her sole focus became recovery. In feverish half-sleep, she sensed Water Lily tending her with herbal salves and teas, Gray Arrow checking her brow for fever, and sometimes the murmur of voices from other people who peered into the teepee, curious about the older white woman who had stumbled into their midst. She'd had no place in the world when Davis Lockwood turned her out. Yet now, ironically, Harriet had found a corner of a Lakota winter camp, where people still bothered to save a stranger's life. She clung to that, as though it were the lifeline she'd never known she needed. Awareness returned in patches, each day granting Harriet more control over her body. On the morning she finally sat upright without feeling dizzy, Water Lily declared her well enough to walk short distances. Harriet, still wrapped in a buffalo robe, took her first trembling steps in the crisp outside air. Bright sunlight made her squint, but her heart soared at the sight of dozens of teepees ranged in a grand circle, smoke curling from their peaks into a robin's egg sky. The ground, though still covered in snow, carried a certain hush that felt almost sacred. Children raced between dwellings, their laughter echoing through the still winter air. Women worked on scraping hides or stirring pots over open fires. Men spoke in clusters, their voices low, occasionally nodding toward Harriet, but rarely meeting her gaze. She sensed curiosity as well as caution. A white woman, older, rescued under strange circumstances. Water Lily guided Harriet through the camp, pointing out essential locations. The communal fire pit for larger gatherings. The solitary spot near the river where water could still be drawn through a hole in the ice. A smaller teepee set aside for healing or childbirth. Harriet found herself instinctively studying everything, the same way she had once learned to identify healing herbs by shape, color, and smell. She realized that, for the first time since crossing the Mississippi all those years ago, she found a place that stirred her curiosity rather than reinforcing her sense of uselessness. How many people are here? Harriet asked Water Lily when her breath returned. 60, maybe more, the older woman answered, proud but practical. Winter camp, smaller than summer gathering. Gray Arrow is on council, voice for peace. She paused, letting Harriet rest a moment. You see how we live? We survive together, none thrown away. The words, gentle though they were, pricked Harriet's wounds. She swallowed down the embarrassment of recalling her nephew's cruelty. Here, the elderly were not tossed out for being unproductive. They occupied positions of esteem as knowledge keepers. She saw it in the way young men or women bowed their heads respectfully whenever Water Lily passed, or how children paused in their games to wave at an elder carrying a basket of supplies. They returned to the teepee. Gray Arrow stood outside, waiting with arms folded. He greeted Harriet with a nod, eyes flicking from her face to her posture, assessing her recovery. Though he said little, Harriet sensed a careful watchfulness, almost protective. She remembered him from her fevered dreams, pressing a flask of warm broth to her lips, quietly urging her to drink. Better, he observed. It wasn't truly a question, but Harriet answered anyway. Yes, much better, she said softly. I can't repay the kindness you've shown. Thank you. Gray Arrow looked away, perhaps uncomfortable with gratitude. You want to heal? We help. It is the way. Now you rest more. Council meets tomorrow to decide. Decide what? Harriet asked, dread skittering through her. Even though she had been saved, might the tribe now decide she was a burden to them? Water Lily touched Harriet's shoulder. Whether you stay or go, some fear trouble if white soldier or agent finds you here. Others say you earn place, we see. The notion that anyone would willingly debate her worth, not from a stance of cruelty but from communal concern, stunned Harriet. She gave a small nod of understanding. I'll speak to them if needed. I have nothing to hide. Gray Arrow's lips curved slightly, whether in approval or faint amusement she couldn't tell. They will ask many questions. The words you choose matter. That night, Harriet's thoughts churned in her mind. She stood at the threshold of the teepee, gazing up at a sky studded with stars so brilliant they seemed to pulse with life. The hush of the camp, the sough of wind across the distant plains. She realized she felt no fear here. For the first time in months, a stirring of hope blossomed in her heart. If the Lakota Council permitted her to remain, she might yet find purpose. Perhaps her knowledge of midwifery and herbal remedies could prove useful. Perhaps these people could see in her the qualities Davis Lockwood had dismissed. She returned inside, curling under the warm hides. Tomorrow, she'd face her second trial in as many weeks, convincing a circle of Lakota leaders that she was no threat, nor a worthless parasite. But if her life so far had taught her anything, it was that she possessed more resilience than anyone, including herself, had realized. Harriet drifted off, lulled by the soft glow of the central fire, praying that dawn would bring a chance to start anew. Council Day came with a dazzling sunrise that painted the snowdrifts in pale gold. Harriet helped Water Lily with basic chores, tidying the teepee, coaxing the morning fire, and preparing strips of dried meat. In the course of these tasks, Harriet discovered something unexpected. She felt useful. Water Lily neither patronized her nor dismissed her as fragile. Instead, the older woman exchanged knowledge in an easy partnership, as if Harriet had always lived here. When midday arrived, Gray Arrow led Harriet to a large central teepee where the council gatherings took place. A half-circle of men, each bearing the unmistakable gravitas of authority, sat on spread buffalo hides. Their gazes were reserved but not hostile. At the center sat an elder with sunken cheeks and feathers laced into his braids, eyes gleaming with quiet intelligence. Beside him was a younger man who Harriet recognized as one of Gray Arrow's closest friends, perhaps an interpreter. Water Lily took a spot near the teepee entrance, quietly indicating that Harriet should stand before the council. Gray Arrow, for his part, stood at Harriet's side, a silent but significant show of support. The elder with the feathers spoke first in Lakota. The younger man translated in careful English for Harriet's benefit. He welcomes you, Harriet Lockwood. He says it is rare for a white woman to live freely among us, and they wish to know your story. Harriet drew in a steadying breath. Her heart pounded, yet she understood the seriousness of this moment. She recounted her life briefly, how her older brother Henry had passed away, how his son Davis Lockwood replaced him, how the nephew chose to oust her in a snowstorm. She tried not to dwell on the bitterness, focusing instead on facts. He declared me too old, no longer worth feeding, she summarized. He set me on the road, knowing I might perish. A ripple of dismay crossed a few council members. Some shook their heads. The elder with feathers asked another question in Lakota, the translator relaying, "He wonders how common it is among your people to discard elders." Harriet's cheeks burned. "Many families do care for their aged," she said, choosing her words carefully, "but it's not guaranteed. In harsh frontier conditions, some see no value in those who can't work the fields or bear children." A low murmur passed through the council, and Harriet braced for condemnation. Instead, one elder rose, speaking in a subdued tone. The translator paraphrased, "He says that among the Hawk Valley Lakota, every person has purpose, especially those with many winters. They guide the children, remember the tribe's stories, keep the herbs' secrets. To discard such knowledge is foolish." "That is why I am grateful," Harriet replied earnestly. "Your people saved me when my own cast me out. I can offer my own knowledge in return, medicine I've practiced, midwifery, reading and numbers if the children wish to learn English." A thoughtful silence descended. Then Gray Arrow spoke, addressing the council in Lakota, but casting the occasional glance Harriet's way. She caught familiar words. Medicine, teacher, good heart. And whatever he was saying in detail, it was a firm endorsement of her presence. The council members listened, some nodding, others frowning. Finally, the elder with feathers stood, raising a hand for quiet. Through the translator, Harriet heard the elder's judgment. "It is decided. Harriet Lockwood may stay among us if she chooses. She must learn our ways as we may learn hers. Let her be as a sister or aunt to all." A surge of relief swept Harriet's limbs, threatening tears. She bowed her head. "Thank you for your trust," she said, voice trembling. "I will do all I can to be worthy of it." The council disbanded, men rising with dignity and stepping out into the crisp daylight. Many acknowledged Harriet with polite nods, though a few avoided her eyes. Gray Arrow lingered by her side, offering a tight-lipped smile that felt oddly private. Together, they exited into the cold air. Water Lily met them at the entrance, her expression bright. "Council sees your value," she said, warmth infusing her tone. "You stay, Harriet Lockwood." "Good." Harriet's heart overflowed at the simple affirmation. It was the moment she had once believed forever lost, a community granting her acceptance instead of shunning her age. She looked up at Gray Arrow, gratitude evident in her gaze. He nodded as if to say, "We have taken the first step, now we walk on." Over the following weeks, Harriet Lockwood settled into daily life among the Hawk Valley Lakota in a way that seemed both natural and wondrous. Rising at dawn, she joined Water Lily and other women in communal tasks. She learned to tan hides using tools and methods far different from anything she had known on the homestead. Her battered hands, once prone to aches in the cold, found new strength in repetitive motions, scraping and stretching the skins until they reached a supple perfection. In the afternoons, Harriet guided a small group of children through rudimentary English lessons, a skill she hadn't used much since leaving her birth family back east. The Lakota language's cadence mingled with the children's enthusiastic attempts at English words. They giggled whenever she stumbled over Lakota phrases, and Harriet responded with good humor, grateful for their patience. She discovered an unexpected joy in teaching, something she'd never had the chance to do in her old life. At times she felt eyes upon her, some curious, some wary. Not everyone in the camp welcomed a white woman in their midst. Harriet sensed a particular chill from a handful of young warriors who had likely lost relatives in skirmishes or raids. Yet no one openly challenged her presence. The council's decision held weight. If the elders said Harriet could stay, then stay she would. Moreover, Gray Arrow's implicit support offered her a protective shield. He was, after all, known for bridging differences, his quiet demeanor masking a keen mind that had negotiated peace in past conflicts with soldiers at Fort Mayfield. Once, Harriet asked Water Lily about Gray Arrow's past. The older woman's face clouded, and she carefully stirred the stew in a pot before replying. "He had a wife many winters ago, child she carried, both lost in soldier attack. He hunted far from camp, returned to see sorrow." Water Lily's eyes softened with pain. "He hated everything white for a time, but hate destroys inside. He chose another path, learned some English, spoke for peace." Harriet felt a pang of empathy. "I'm sorry for his loss." She had never married. The idea of losing a beloved spouse or child was beyond her direct experience. Yet the anguish in Water Lily's voice, the lines around her mouth, told Harriet that grief transcended cultural lines. In that moment, she understood more deeply Gray Arrow's poised reserve and his impulse to save a solitary wanderer in the snow. For her part, Harriet also offered healing knowledge. She brewed teas for colds and coughs, taught the correct measurement of certain herbal pastes, and discovered that some Lakota plants, unknown to her, held even stronger medicinal properties than what her mother had taught her. It became an active exchange. She offered what she knew of settler medicine, and the tribe introduced her to the bounty of the plains: wild licorice for fevers, chokecherry bark for rheumatism, sweet flag root for stomach troubles. Such synergy fueled a sense of purpose Harriet hadn't felt in years. Alongside the blossoming of her role as teacher and healer, Harriet found her conversations with Gray Arrow deepening. He might pass by her teaching teepee simply to listen, dark eyes focused on the children's recitations, or he might appear after sundown, bringing strips of smoked deer for her supper, never overstepping, but quietly ensuring she had all she needed. On rare evenings, they would walk along the edge of camp, sharing truncated stories of their vastly different lives. His from the vantage of a tribal warrior losing ancestral lands, hers from the vantage of a woman cast aside by the very society that claimed to protect its own. What neither fully acknowledged was an unspoken current, a pull that went beyond mere gratitude. A spinster in white culture, Harriet had resigned herself to a solitary fate, especially since Davis's betrayal. But here, living among a tribe that respected the wisdom of age, she felt confidence unfurl like a flower opening in the first rays of spring. Gray Arrow's quiet courtesy and his willingness to treat her as a valued equal stirred feelings she'd believed long dormant. Still, she was cautious. The Lakota faced mounting pressures from the encroachment of settlers and soldiers. Rumors from Fort Mayfield warned of new policies aimed at confining all tribes to reservations. Harriet recognized the tension in Gray Arrow whenever those rumors reached camp. The tribe's older members urged calm, patience. Some younger warriors thirsted for confrontation. And so Harriet, too, lived in the shadow of uncertain storms, both personal and political. But for the moment, she savored each day as a gift. She savored the children's progress in English, the women's acceptance of her healing skills, and the soft smile that occasionally curved Gray Arrow's lips when she spoke. She had survived the blizzard and the rejection of her own kin, only to find acceptance among those who had every reason to distrust her. It was a paradox that made her keenly aware of life's capriciousness and its generosity. One crisp morning, Harriet awoke to commotion rippling through the camp. A handful of warriors, Gray Arrow among them, were preparing to depart. She caught hushed fragments: a trading post near Falcon Creek, an incident of cruelty by its overseer, and calls for retribution. Through partial conversations, Harriet surmised that an Indian agent named Thomason had beaten 2 Lakota men, refusing their legitimate trade with half the furs owed. Outrage smoldered beneath the tribe's measured exterior. From her earlier life, Harriet knew how the official channels for Indian complaints often worked: slowly, indifferently, or not at all. The hawkish glint in some warriors' eyes told her a direct response might be imminent. Gray Arrow made no attempt to hide his involvement. His stance was calm, but Harriet read the determination in the set of his shoulders. She approached him quietly as he checked a horse's bridle. "You're leaving?" she asked. "Is it safe?" His gaze flicked to her, then back to the bridle. "Safe? No, but must be done. Agent steals from the tribe, beats our men. No more peace talk if no one listens." Harriet's heart clenched. She recalled what Water Lily had said about his history, his wife, unborn child, all lost in a soldier-led raid. Yet he had staked his reputation on preventing bloodshed. Now a single agent's brutality risked upending years of fragile stability. "Will there be violence, Wishraz?" she asked quietly, hating the naive quiver in her tone. Gray Arrow met her eyes with a somber clarity. "We do not seek death, but sometimes force is the only language they hear." She swallowed, wanting to protest that there must be another way. Letters, official complaints, something. Then she remembered how ineffective white bureaucracy had been at protecting even her. She, a white woman of advanced years, had found no mercy from her own kin. How much less mercy would a corrupt agent show the Lakota? "Return safely," she whispered at last. It was all she could say, the weight of helplessness crushing her. He gave a single nod, then spurred his horse to join the others. The party thundered out of camp before dawn's full light. Days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Harriet resumed her teaching tasks, but the children sensed her tension, their own worries echoing. Water Lily went about her healing work with the same calm efficiency, though Harriet detected shadows under her eyes, a mother's anxiety for a son on a dangerous errand. Others in the camp maintained outward composure, but Harriet felt the taut undercurrent, a collective breath being held. On the 3rd afternoon after Gray Arrow's departure, the war party returned. Harriet heard the distant hoofbeats and hurried with Water Lily to the camp's edge. The riders emerged in a somber column, their faces bearing weariness and a flicker of pride. Harriet's relief at seeing Gray Arrow safe was tempered by the sight of wounded men slumped in makeshift travois. Bloodstains marred clothing and hides. Word spread they had raided the trading post at Falcon Creek, freeing a young man wrongfully locked in a storage cellar and reclaiming goods stolen by the agent. There had been a skirmish. Though no one was killed, several were injured, including Gray Arrow himself. Harriet's heartbeat stuttered when she saw him dismount, with blood streaking his left sleeve. Yet he walked with head unbowed, issuing instructions to care for the wounded. Instinct drove Harriet to the healing lodge, a large teepee set aside for medical needs. She and Water Lily, along with 2 other seasoned women, swiftly organized the injured. A man with a deep chest wound from a bayonet thrust needed immediate stitching. Another with a bullet graze across the scalp required cleaning and bandaging to avoid infection. Harriet found herself up to her elbows in blood, her heart thrumming with focused determination. Here she was in her element, competent, unafraid. Only after the urgent cases were seen did she step outside to find Gray Arrow. He stood a short distance away, directing others to unload crates and barrels from the raid. Harriet crossed to him, noticing the dried blood on his arm. "Your wound needs cleaning." He shook his head. "Others need lodge more. Mine is small." "Don't argue," Harriet said firmly, her nerves frayed. The adrenaline left her trembling, and her voice came out sharper than intended. "If you get infected, who leads these people then?" Gray Arrow's lips curved in a faint grin, respect flickering in his gaze. "Fine, but not in the crowded lodge. Come to my teepee." A flicker of unease skittered through her. She had never been alone with him inside his personal living space. But Harriet recognized the practicality. Water Lily and the other healers were fully occupied with more serious wounds, and Gray Arrow and Dee required only minor care. She nodded. The interior of Gray Arrow's teepee felt both familiar and foreign. Weapons carefully arranged on racks, shared space with baskets of supplies. A small fire pit glowed at the center. Without ceremony, Harriet motioned for him to sit near the light. She removed his stained buckskin shirt, confirming a shallow slash from wrist to elbow. It wasn't serious, but it needed thorough cleaning and bandaging. He watched her work with silent intensity, as though memorizing each movement. "Thank you," he said softly when she finished wrapping the wound. "You do this with skill." Harriet exhaled a shaky laugh. "I've tended enough frontier injuries to develop some skill." Then she surprised herself by resting a hand gently on his uninjured arm. "I'm glad you're home safe." His dark eyes warmed with an emotion that roused a gentle flutter within her. For a moment, Harriet felt suspended between worlds, one in which she was a discarded spinster, the other in which she was a valued healer. Maybe something more. The tension parted like a veil, leaving them in a hush of unspoken understanding. Then Gray Arrow cleared his throat and stood. "We have to help the others now," he said, the quiet closeness dissolving. Harriet nodded, stepping aside, aware they were both needed elsewhere, but the lingering heat of that moment stayed with her long after they left the teepee, proof of a connection growing in the embers of shared trials. The days after the raid proved restless. Though Harriet and the other healers managed to save all the injured, the act of striking a government trading post spelled out potential retaliation from soldiers. Sentinel scouts doubled around the camp, while the elders debated next steps. Some insisted on breaking camp to move deeper into the western hills. Others argued that scattering would only invite more oppression from Fort Mayfield, or from whichever new agent might replace Thomason at Falcon Creek. Meanwhile, Harriet poured her energies into continuing to teach the children. In the process, she unintentionally broadened her role, becoming a quiet liaison between the tribe and an outside world they had little reason to trust. On the morning she showed them a tattered English primer, gifted by a traveling missionary years ago, the children gathered eagerly, absorbing each letter as though it might open a door to new possibilities. "They like your words," said Gray Arrow, quietly observing from the teepee entrance. Harriet found herself smiling. "They're keen learners." "I had it by learners, but I learn as much from them as they do from me." He stepped closer, offering Harriet a few battered pages of notes. "I found this, some English Lakota phrases. Maybe it helps you speak better with elders." Surprise warmed her chest. "Thank you, I'd love that." Their shared conversation about language led to a soft hush in the children, who sensed a different undertone. But Harriet ignored their curious stares, focusing on the scribbled lines of text that Gray Arrow presented. In that simple moment, two people from worlds in conflict, exchanging knowledge about each other's languages, Harriet felt a profound sense of belonging. That evening, as she read over the pages by firelight, Water Lily approached. The older woman settled beside Harriet, her face calm but her gaze serious. "We see how Gray Arrow watches you," she said in her direct way, "and how you watch him." Harriet flushed, struggling to find words. "He lost wife and child long ago, but heart still strong, still open. You hold that heart now." A swirl of emotions seized Harriet. "I'm not sure what you mean," she murmured, though in truth she sensed exactly what Water Lily hinted at. The bond forming between her and Gray Arrow had gained an unspoken depth, an intimacy that lingered in glances and shared tasks. Yet Harriet felt uncertain. She was nearly 50, a woman dismissed by her own people. Why would Gray Arrow, an influential Lakota warrior, see her as anything more than a friend? Water Lily smiled at Harriet's evasive protest. He is no child, needs no new babies. He needs partner, wisdom, friend. Age does not matter to Lakota the same way as whites. The older woman brushed Harriet's hair aside gently. But you decide. If you fear your own world's judgments, that is your burden. Harriet stared into the flickering fire, grappling with a tangle of feelings. Desire to live openly in this new life. Fear of repeating the pain of rejection. More than that, she imagined what her nephew's neighbors would say if they discovered Harriet, once labeled a spinster with no childbearing potential, might wed a Lakota warrior. Then she recalled the look on Gray Arrow's face when they'd locked eyes earlier that day. Fierce yet tender, carrying a concern that spanned beyond duty. Warmth seeped through Harriet's veins, banishing the ghostly chill of her old insecurities. The next morning, Harriet gathered courage and approached Gray Arrow outside his teepee. He was checking the sharpened blade of a tomahawk, but paused as she neared. "May we walk?" she asked. He agreed, and together they strolled through the thinning snow, stepping beyond the edge of camp to a small bluff overlooking a winding creek. The hush of the plains enveloped them, broken only by the cry of a distant bird. Harriet didn't know how to start, so Gray Arrow spoke first. "My mother sees many things," he said, glancing sideways. "She wonders if there is a path between us. You and me." The moment hung in the frosty air, charged with a vulnerability Harriet recognized in his tone. She inhaled, heart thudding. "What if there is?" she managed. "Your people saved me, gave me a place. You offered me respect when my own family saw me as worthless. But it's more than gratitude, I feel. I'm drawn to you, to this life." His expression softened. "I too see in you a spirit not broken by storms, both the storm of snow and the storm of rejection. We are older, yes, but that only means we understand life better." She felt his hand brush hers, a brief contact that sent a pulse of warmth through her body. "But many in your world would disapprove, and ours may question. Does it matter?" Harriet shook her head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not anymore. I know where I've found true acceptance. If my own society rejects me, so be it. Here, I have purpose, friends, and maybe," she hesitated, swallowing emotion, "maybe love." He let out a breath that might have been relief. They exchanged a searching look that made the bleak winter landscape glow with an indescribable possibility. "We move carefully," Gray Arrow murmured at length. "These times are dangerous. Soldiers or agents may force us from this place, but if you wish it, we walk together." She smiled through tears she didn't realize she had shed. "I wish it." They returned to camp hand in hand, uncertain of the future but certain of each other. Two older souls who had thought their days of new beginnings were behind them, finding instead that life could grant second chances in the most unexpected places. News of Harriet Lockwood's deepening bond with Gray Arrow circulated through the camp like wildfire, eliciting a spectrum of responses. Many greeted the development with approving smiles, especially elders who respected Harriet's healing knowledge and valued Gray Arrow's discernment. Some of the younger folk exchanged curious, amused looks. Harriet was, after all, an older white woman, far beyond childbearing years. How could such a marriage align with the tribe's norms? Yet Harriet found no open hostility. Among the Lakota, an elder's status didn't hinge on fertility. Gray Arrow's role in leading negotiations and bridging with other bands carried weight. Quiet acceptance settled over the camp. If Harriet and Gray Arrow felt a genuine kinship, who was to say it should be denied? Still, Harriet wrestled with her own insecurities, reticent to assume that Gray Arrow truly wanted marriage. She was accustomed to the frontier's romantic ideals, which prized youth and domestic utility in a wife. But the Lakota worldview, she discovered, held different values. An older companion could bring wisdom and steadiness, forging a deeper partnership. One evening around the communal fire, Gray Arrow publicly spoke of Harriet, praising her skill with children's teaching and herbs. The mention caused Harriet to blush as appreciative murmurs rose from onlookers. 2 days later, a cavalcade of new troubles arrived in the form of Lieutenant Fletcher from Fort Mayfield. He came with a half-dozen cavalrymen under a white flag, all wearing stiff expressions. Harriet sensed the camp bracing as the lieutenant explained his mission. The raid on Falcon Creek had stirred the Indian Affairs Office. Agents demanded accountability for those involved. Harriet, recognized as a link between them, was also on their list of persons of interest, a phrase Harriet found chilling. They suspect you might be coerced, Lieutenant Fletcher told Harriet with a faint flush. The agency is talking about rescuing you forcibly if necessary. She stared aghast. I choose to live here. The tribe saved me from dying in a blizzard. She cast a glance at Gray Arrow, whose jaw tensed, though he kept silent. Fletcher shook his head, eyes reflecting genuine regret. I believe you, but the bureaucracy sees a story ripe for dramatics. An older white woman lost among savages. They want to exploit it as an excuse to push this band onto a reservation. The words sliced deeper than Harriet expected. She had seen how the so-called authorities twisted facts for their gain. She gazed at Gray Arrow, recalling every indignity his people had suffered. That was why the Falcon Creek raid was considered inevitable by some. What do we do? Harriet asked, voice low. Gray Arrow drew himself up. We decide together as a people. If soldiers plan to force us away, we may travel farther west or negotiate again. He fixed Fletcher with a steady gaze. But we do not give up Harriet. She is our family now. Lieutenant Fletcher nodded with a mix of admiration and defeat. I'll inform my superiors you've stated as much, but I can't guarantee their response. I suggest caution. After escorting him to the edge of camp, the tribe convened a council. Tensions ran high. Some voices rose, urging immediate retreat to more remote areas. Others felt they should remain, confronting the agency's demands. Harriet voiced that the outcome at Fort Mayfield might go either way. She volunteered to speak on the tribe's behalf if needed, though her words held limited power. Gray Arrow placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. No matter what, you are with us. Some battles cannot be won in white courts, but we will face them as family. His simple declaration eased Harriet's dread, though she feared for the tribe's fate. The unstoppable tide of settlers and government policies loomed. One night, as Harriet and Gray Arrow walked along the frozen creek, she laid her head briefly against his shoulder. He didn't flinch. Instead, he drew her closer. I had thought my life's winter was here, she whispered. Yet you taught me a heart can still blossom, even in the coldest season. Gray Arrow smiled faintly, turning to press his forehead gently to hers. Among us, winter is simply another cycle. After storms, the land blooms again. So do hearts, if they find warmth in each other. Their wedding, if it could be called that, came about in a humble yet profoundly moving ceremony. The Hawk Valley Lakota accepted Harriet not just as a guest, but as a full member, given her healing work and the council's earlier blessings. They decided a union between Harriet Lockwood and Gray Arrow signified more than a personal bond. It reflected a willingness to honor love and loyalty over cultural lines. Word spread quickly. Children helped string colored cloth between teepees, while the women prepared a generous feast. Venison stew, dried berries, and fresh bread Harriet had taught them to bake in a simple clay oven. Gray Arrow adorned himself in ceremonial buckskin, quill work dancing across the shoulders. Harriet wore a dress Water Lily had made, beaded patterns telling Harriet's story. A lone figure in a snowstorm, then circled by horses, then joined by a Lakota warrior. It was breathtaking, a narrative of her journey into acceptance. At sunrise, the couple stood before the elders, each placing a hand on a specially painted shield that symbolized unity. Gray Arrow's calm voice rose, affirming their union in Lakota, which a young man then translated to English for Harriet's sake. I choose you as my partner in winter and spring, in hardships and joys. Our hearts walk side by side. Harriet, tears brimming, repeated her own vow in halting Lakota, eliciting murmurs of approval. She then added in English for all to hear, I pledge my life to you and to this people who have saved me, taught me, and shown me the worth of my years. Water Lily approached, draping a soft buffalo robe around them both, binding their shoulders together. With that, Harriet was no longer a castaway from white society. She was Harriet Lockwood of the Hawk Valley Lakota, wife to Gray Arrow, elder and teacher. The crowd cheered, whooping and clapping as children scampered between them. The small cluster of young warriors who once eyed Harriet with suspicion now offered respectful nods, acknowledging that the council's approval and Gray Arrow's choice sealed her place. Throughout the day, laughter mingled with drum beats and the aroma of roasting meat wafted across camp. Harriet drifted in a happy daze, greeting well-wishers, sharing thanks with each. Even the faint worry of Indian agents or soldiers interfering receded under the warmth of celebration. She locked gazes with Gray Arrow across the fire at times, marveling that a man so tested by loss could welcome her so completely. He, in turn, watched her with a new gentleness, as if claiming her presence as a treasure unexpectedly recovered. At twilight, Harriet and Gray Arrow retreated to the new teepee erected just for them. Inside, the flickering firelight played on the walls painted with symbols of blessing, rising suns, protective animal figures, in the shape of a lone star uniting two silhouettes. Harriet touched the designs, heart full. She thought of the travails that had led her here, her nephew's cruelty, her near death in the snow, her uncertain acceptance in this camp. It all now coalesced into one truth. Life could turn heartbreak into renewal if one dared to walk a different path. Gray Arrow lit the central fire. The glow illuminated his face, lined but strong, a reflection of her own quietly weathered features. He offered her a wooden bowl of sweetened tea, a sign of partnership. As they sat, Harriet felt her pulse steady in the hush. "Are you content?" he asked, voice hushed. "More than that," she replied, eyes shining. "I'm home." For 12 years, Harriet and Gray Arrow faced each tribulation with a unity that defied both white and Lakota skeptics. Harriet's healing skills expanded, bridging more alliances with traveling frontier doctors. Gray Arrow's voice and counsel guided the tribe through shifting politics. Over time, government agents arrived, demanding relocation. The couple joined the tribe in navigating those fraught negotiations, sometimes moving camp, sometimes standing firm, all while Harriet insisted on her unbreakable bond with these people who had embraced her. In the archives of frontier records, Harriet Lockwood's name appears only in a handful of brief references, occasionally as a curiosity or in footnotes about an elder white woman among the Dakota. Yet among the Hawk Valley Lakota, her story endured. Children who once giggled at her English lessons grew into adults who retold how a spinster, deemed too old by her own relatives, found her life's second bloom in a Lakota winter camp. They spoke of how her marriage to Gray Arrow reminded them that age, far from a curse, could be an asset, and that belonging could be found where least expected. Decades later, Harriet passed away during a harsh winter, at roughly 60 years old, having outlived her nephew and most of her generation in white society. Gray Arrow performed the mourning rites with stoic reverence. The tribe honored her as an elder who left behind no children of her own body, but countless sons and daughters of her spirit. Her legacy lived on in the stories told by those who had sat at her knee, learning the alphabet in one breath and the Lakota names for healing roots in the next. When wandering travelers or historians spoke of a certain Harriet Lockwood, some dismissed it as a myth. How could a discarded older woman claim a place among hostiles and even marry one of them? But for those who understood, Harriet's tale was a testament to the truth that love, respect, and renewal can sprout in any ground, even the frozen plains, if only both sides are willing to see value in one another. And so it remained. Harriet, once spurned by her own, became a cherished elder among the Lakota, proving that age is never the end of a story, but merely another chapter in a life written by courage and connection. Looking back, Harriet Lockwood's path was never straightforward, but it was hers to choose. Cast aside for her age, she found both fresh purpose and true acceptance among Gray Arrow's people. Yes, there were whispers about their union, and not every onlooker viewed it with kindness. Yet Harriet's own heart, once battered by rejection, learned to open again. She brought her frontier teachings to Lakota children who surprised her with their quick minds and eager hearts. In return, they offered her the warmth of a genuine family, one that valued her wisdom and resilience above all else. Harriet discovered that renewing one's life can happen at any chapter. Real connection doesn't hinge on youth or conventional norms. What do you think? If this story moved or inspired you, let us know in the comments. Share your insights or questions, and remember to subscribe for more uplifting frontier stories and to support our storytelling community.